It's your boy, Jules Judah. I got Tiffany. We got a message.
We all know some things happen for a reason. Don't let go, soon you'll be inside your new season. Just get ready, don't hesitate, for this is your day. Rejoice and be glad.
My friend, Dr. Ray Johnson here with another edition of Monday's Meal right here in the Walk of Dominion. I'm so glad you're taking time to tune in on this Monday as we are approaching nearing the end of August. Children are on their way back to school. Come on, somebody give the Lord a great praise right there. Thank you for tuning in on tonight. It is more manna to move you towards your life mandate here on Monday's Meal. I am your host, Dr. Ray Johnson, Senior Pastor and Bishop right here in the Walk of Dominion. I'm ready to get right on into this word right on this evening with more nuggets of truth to help move you. You know, we've been talking this month, in the month of August, about the blessing of the Lord and how the blessing of the Lord actually begins in our life when he gives us a chance to begin again. And most of us may not realize that that in and of itself is the blessing. We've been saying all month long, simply because it means that God's not finished with us yet, that he's giving us another opportunity to actually live out our life purpose and to actually live out his promises for each and every one of our lives. So I want to deep dive in. Back on yesterday's word, we talked about the blessing of a second time around. And I'm telling you, sometimes God blesses the next generation based on the faith of the first generation, or he waits to the second half of your life to provide the blessing in your life. We took a look at the children of Israel right there in Joshua chapter 1. When the text says, Moses, my servant, is dead, and God gives some instruction to Israel through Joshua about being strong and courageous. I'm going to pick that back up in just a few seconds. But an interesting thing took place in the message on yesterday. We began to talk about not only the death, but the destiny, and understanding God controls the deed of the promise of our future. I want to pick up the one in regards to the deed of the promise of our future. You know, the deed is a transferable document, a legal covenant that provides ownership. And I'll begin to talk about how God began to say to Joshua, I'm going to give these people this land because I have sworn by myself. And sometimes what God does when he is real serious, he cuts covenant with himself to remove all flesh out of the way, and he provides his own deed to do exactly what he said. I took us back. Remember Genesis chapter 15, and we jaywalked through verses 7 through verse 15 in Genesis 15, where God cut covenant with Abraham. Remember, he was Abram at that time, and he actually had him provide the sacrifices of turtle doves, pigeons, and then the carcasses of ram, and then a 3-year-old lamb or 3-year-old heifer and a lamb, a baby lamb, and he cut them in two. Didn't cut the birds, however. And then all of a sudden, that infinity process where God walks in between himself after the dread of darkness, sleep, almost like death, came upon Moses, because God was not going to have any flesh get involved in his promises, in his word. I'm sorry, shameless plug, which is to say that nobody, no man, no person will be able to take glory for what God's about to do in the midst of your story. He gonna get all of the credit all by himself about what he's about to do in your life. My goodness, in here, let me not go all the way back into the message, but here was the important part. We got to the end right around verses 12, 13, and 14, and 15 of Genesis chapter 15. And here is what we found out. We found out that God had already predetermined with a timetable and a date and time whereby which Israel would experience bondage in the place of Egypt because he had planned to get glory for himself. Some things you experience and that you go through are not even about you. It's about God and your adversary and how God is bringing himself glory over your adversary and using you in the process. My goodness, in here, I'm trying my best just to give the nuggets. Let me get to it quickly. Here is the specific point. The specific point was that they will be there in a land that is not theirs, that they have not known for a period of 400 years, because the iniquity of the Amorites has not yet been fulfilled. You mean to tell me that there is a time lapse and a time definition and a time process that God's at work in dealing with some issues outside of you in your life? So I got to thinking, what would it look like to help us manage the process of time? Remember yesterday I talked about how God stands outside of time and uses time to his advantage and actually begins to work on us in time to bring about, here I am again, more glory by using you in your story. So tonight, Nuggets of Truth, I want to talk to us a little bit about how do we manage the process of time. How do we manage the process of time? And one of the first things that I think is critically important about understanding the management of the process of time is that God himself literally holds time in his hand. What do you mean when you say that, preacher? This is what we mean when we say that. We mean that we've got to make an adjustment in our perspective. I said it already inside of tonight's particular Nuggets of Truth. We've got to have a larger perspective. Really what we need is a panoramic view. The higher we get in the spirit by way of our prayer life, our eyes can begin to open to see all the pieces to the puzzle that God is at work in. One of the ways that you manage time is you've got to have God's perspective. He sees the end from the beginning to help us to make sense of things in the middle. So like we said, based in the text on yesterday, the time of the iniquity of the Amorites had not yet been complete. What we missed, if you have not really studied the scriptures carefully, is that God was dealing with the gods, quote unquote, of Egypt. And not only we discovered was he dealing with the gods of Egypt and pulling them out and taking them through the wilderness in the promised land. When he got to the promised land, he was dealing with the iniquity of the Amorites and Ai. Remember, we began to talk about the gods of Ai, a false god trinity that had established itself among those people where Satan began to rear his head through these false deities, and God was intent on destroying them. Do you remember 2 weeks ago the message in that one, how he brought the king of Ai out, who had established this religion in the area of Ai in the land of Canaan, and God used Joshua to dismantle all of that. I wonder what he's going to use you to dismantle in our culture today. All of this helps you to understand how to manage time. Number two, managing time is about a process. It's about a process whereby which we are coming to learn, to develop our faith, trust, and obey God. Can I say it again? Developing our faith, trust, and learning how to obey God. I got to give it to you one more time. Developing our faith, learning how to trust and obey God. We have faith that God is, but we sometimes lack faith that God can, hear me, and that God will now. Oh, goodness in here. Let me say it again. We have faith that God is, but then sometimes we struggle a little bit with understanding that God can, and then we really wrestle with God will now. Come on, now faith is the substance of things hoped for the evidence of things that are not seen. What you need right now is now faith, believing that God can, that he will right now. And the process of that is learning how to have a dependence on God, not people, God, not programs, God, not somebody else's process, God. And processing through all of that is critically important. And what God had to do with the people of Israel is repeat over to them, only be strong and courageous. I'm talking tonight about how to manage the process of time while God is at work to bring himself glory through your story. I'm landing the plane tonight with the last one. Know of a surety God has a plan. I got to say it one more time. It's not only perspective, being able to handle the process, but know of a surety God has a plan. Where do you get that from in that Joshua chapter 1, preacher? I'm still right in there, verses 6 through 8. He says on 3 different times, be strong and courageous. Only be strong and courageous. Only be strong and courageous. Watch it. And then he says, and be careful to observe and to do. To observe and to do. To observe and to do all the things that I have commanded you through my servant Moses. A lot of times we will observe the commandments of God, but it's the doing the commandments of God that brings about the breakthrough in your life. We've got to graduate from just being hearers of the word and observers of the word and studiers of the word to become those who obey the word. And here I am again with this word trust, learning how to trust God's ways. There is a way that seems right unto us humankind, but in the end therein lies destruction. Blessed is the man who commits his way to the Lord, for his plans shall be established. I hope that this manna has been nuggets of truth to help move you towards your life mandate. Wake up with Lady tomorrow morning. She's got more effectual, fervent prayer. That's one of the things that can help us through the perspective, process, and God's plan to be able to understand how to navigate and manage time. I want you to know there is a promised place, blessing for you in the second time or second season of your life, and you're coming into it right about now. Wake up with her tomorrow morning right at 6 a.m. We'll see you again. God bless you. Take care. Bye-bye.